Hello everyone, this is Star Wars Connection. Today we're going to talk about portrayals of masculinity in Star Wars with a special focus on Kylo Ren. My name's Denise and I'm here with Lee.
Hi everybody.
What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's a very interesting topic because most of the characters in Star Wars are male.
Yeah.
And we see, an example of what is supposed to be a good man and what's supposed to be an evil man. And then we have kind of in between people like Kylo Ren. So it's a topic that we've been wanting to talk about for a while, but I think it's more relevant now that we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi.
Yeah, Kylo Ren, I think his portrayal of masculinity got a lot of people talking. We had the emo Kylo Ren, which I love, by the way. I think it's hilarious. And people talking about Kylo Ren. And a lot of people were like this idea that, oh no, he's not like Vader. Maybe he should be like Vader. Almost like he's not masculine enough, whatever this masculine, let's say in quotation marks, is, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people were saying that he whines too much, and he didn't whine like even once actually, but like, he complains and he cries and he's weak, he got defeated by a girl. I think he had a lot of backlash because of that sense that people got that he wasn't a strong character like Darth Vader.
Yeah, I think one thing that's funny is that he throws tantrums, when he breaks things, and that's in a way, he's dangerous. He seems very unhinged with anger, but it's not really dangerous. For some reason, like with Vader choking his underlings, it's not funny,
Exactly.
And it's aggressive as well. But somehow for him, it's almost something that, in a way, it's interesting because it can identify with real life teenagers and kids even.
Yes, and you have to wonder, I think it was a deliberate choice by the filmmakers. It's almost comical in a way when you see him flipping out and the stormtroopers walk away. And even from the start, he was so impressive when he comes off his space shuttle and, he's doing these amazing things with the Force. But then the whole thing with Poe, who talks first, you talk first, I talk first. They're inserting things deliberately to make it so that he's not as menacing, that you don't take him as seriously as you did Darth Vader. And I think, to me, I understood that as a hint that he's not going to be Darth Vader. This is a different character and his arc is going to be different, and maybe he's not going to end up being the big bad, the evil guy, right? But a lot of people were disappointed by that. I remember reading a lot of online criticism about that scene in particular because they felt that Poe was undermining Kylo and Vader would not have been undermined. So from the beginning, people were comparing him to his grandfather and finding him defective in a way.
Yeah, but the comparison does not come out of nowhere, right?
Exactly.
He as a character aspires to be like that, and I think it's a theme, how the new movies aspire to be like the old trilogy, and the question is, why does he aspire to be like that? Why does he think that image of his grandpa, like the bad image of Vader, is the good one? And I had a comment about anger and how it's more acceptable as a demonstration of feelings. And
yeah, oftentimes when people are expressing anger, it's just a way that they can express their pain and their sadness. But it seems more powerful to be angry than to be sad and crying. So in men, oftentimes socially, it's seen as more acceptable if you yell and you flip out, as opposed to if you cry. But it's still an expression of emotion that can be very intense and very painful to deal with. So I think with Kylo, he tries to present as very contained, very calm and methodical. There's something almost robotic about the way that he talks when he's got the mask on. And he's very kind of eerily still, and his body language is conveying that he's trying to keep it together. But then the way that he has his fists, he carries his fists balled up, and then he's calm, but then all of a sudden it's boom, this explosion and all this rage comes out. So I think that is very telling of the inner turmoil that he has. What he's trying to portray himself as is very different from what's going on internally.
Yeah, he's aspiring to something that he has some difficulty matching, right? And it's interesting to think of Darth Vader as this figure of pure masculinity, which is almost scary in a way if you think about Luke and finding out that his father is this almost unhinged, dangerous masculinity, which you could interpret a little bit of the old trilogy. But then, you had Anakin in the prequels, which had lots of problems, but you had something that was different and that suffered similar criticisms, that he was too weak, too whiny, that he cried, and that is something that bothered people.
Yeah, and you actually made a great observation about how they've chosen to portray Anakin slightly different in the TV shows, right?
Yeah, actually, because the Clone Wars, I love the Clone Wars, and I think Anakin in the Clone Wars is amazing. And the actor that portrays him is Matt Lanter, who's really great, but he has a deep voice, and also the way they draw him, he has like a square jaw, so he's like a lot more masculine. Again, let's put quotation marks here, because it doesn't mean anything really, right? But perceived as masculine, and people think that, you know, they're fixing Anakin because, well, they did fix in many ways, but you know, how making him more masculine. And I actually think that it was actually a good choice to have an actor that has a soft voice, that has delicate features, because the idea is this contrast of this masculinity of Vader, this aggressive and not human, not in touch with his feelings and nothing, you know, that there's this nothingness, this that's Vader that Kylo is actually aspiring to be like, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, when you think about like the development of boys into men kind of thing, I like to always look at it from like a Freudian, lens, because I'm very interested in that sort of thing. And the idea is that boys initially fear their father figure and they fear castration, right? So then they decide to align themselves with their father and try to emulate their father and be like their father, because if I'm like you, then you won't, hurt me. They aspire to become more like their dad. And that has to happen, for you to kind of learn from your male figures, like how to be a man, supposedly. But there's always a period of rebellion that usually occurs in adolescence, where you're kind of shunning the way that things are supposed to be, and you say, well, I'm going to do my own thing. Anakin is very much in rebellion, especially in the second and third installments of his trilogy. He's basically rejecting everything that he's been shown that he's supposed to do. And he stays in this turmoil throughout the PT. As Vader, he's already supposedly reached this stage of development where he's comfortable with, who he is, and he's kind of calmly doing the bidding of his master. So he's intimidating and threatening. When Luke comes along, he's also trying to, in a way, he's saying, well, am I going to become like my father? That's his big crisis, seeing himself as Vader and desperately trying to reject that. He has to come to terms with it in a way and face off against Vader and himself. And ultimately he's able to do that. And so he successfully navigates that. With Kylo, right now, he's just so desperately trying to hang on to this idealized Darth Vader. And it's hard to make an analysis here because we don't know exactly what he knows.
Yeah.
And actually, Pablo made a very interesting comment recently in the Comic-Con Chile panel that he held, and we made an analysis of that on Tumblr. We'll show it in the video so you guys can read about it. But he basically was kind of fielding audience questions, and somebody asked him, does Kylo Ren know that his grandfather eventually became good? And Pablo said, I think he does know, but it's like he got information about Anakin, Darth Vader, from someone else and from Luke, and then he decided what he was going to choose to believe. So it's unclear like who told him what. Maybe Luke told him, about Darth Vader, but didn't tell him this is your grandfather, and maybe Snoke. I mean, one can only assume it was Snoke who told him the rest. What was he told, and why did he make that decision to align himself with this idea of the evil, strong, dark grandfather as opposed to the one who became redeemed? For me, when I heard that, I thought, well, maybe he thought that Luke and Han were weak in some way, and he decided that he wanted to be strong like his grandfather because he's the one that he's identifying with. But we don't really know at this point. It's kind of like we have an incomplete picture.
Yeah, and I think some people theorize that maybe he killed Han like he's kind of a double agent and he had to do it. But there's the interrogation scene, and when he talks to Rain, he seems to be very honest, and he seems, the murderers, thieves, and traitors, and I think he has a negative image of his father,
Definitely.
which might have been because of Snoke, who actually is a father figure to him. Totally right.
Definitely.
He goes running to Daddy. The scavenger, she resisted.
With Kylo, what he says to Rey is very telling about his ideas about his father. Like you say, he tells her, you think of Han Solo as the father you never had. He would have disappointed you. I mean, basically he's telling her, he disappointed me. I know for a fact that he would have disappointed you. And then when he faces Han Solo in the bridge in that moment just before he kills him, Han says, I want to see the face of my son. Kylo says, he was weak and foolish like his father, so I destroyed him. And then Kylo goes on to destroy his dad too. So obviously he felt like he was more aligned with his dad before he turned. And now that he's on the dark side, he feels like he's more aligned with his grandfather. At least that's what he's trying to make everybody else believe. But again, really telling when he's alone with the mask and he's talking to it, almost like praying to it in a way. And he's like, help me, grandfather. I need to be this thing, but I don't know if I can do it. Show me how to do it. So he's obviously chosen his idea of Darth Vader as the model to aspire to, in that as far as maybe masculinity, but certainly how to be a force user.
But I think it does relate to masculinity in a way, like metaphorical. Is it this idea that it's not really who he is, right? He's aspiring to do something that is not him in reality. And it's actually not a real ideal because, not even Vader was like purely Darth Vader. He was Anakin and he died as Anakin, as whiny, everything, like Luke as well. People said, oh, he was whiny because he was like a regular teenager. And
well, Luke was whiny though.
Yeah, he was. And it's true that Kylo never whines and never really complains, he never says that, but somehow the impression sticks, I don't know, maybe because he's not dangerous or something, I don't know.
Yeah, why do you think that some people, because not everybody, a lot of people love Kylo, but I feel like when you talk to people who dislike Kylo, it's either because they perceive him as not as cool as Darth Vader, or kind of a letdown as compared to Darth Vader, or because they have a problem with the actor. I've heard less of that, really. People saying like, oh, he's the guy from Girls. I haven't heard that as often anymore, but certainly when the movie first came out, people were like, oh my god, it's Adam, but I think that he inhabits the role of Kylo so well in the movie, so I think that's less of an issue. But some people find him lacking. Why do you think that is? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's all that we said, being challenged by Poe, and also the fact that he lost, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think people expect him, some people actually would like him to become a very dangerous villain the way Darth Vader was at some point, and he wasn't. He was eventually defeated, and even, a known force sensitive, at least as far as the Force Awakens stormtrooper, held his own against him for a minute. Why do you think that happened?
I think that people don't like to see their bad guy in conflict. They wanted him to just be like a killing machine and to enjoy being evil, kind of like Palpatine maybe, just loving every second of it. And Kylo is obviously suffering. He's in pain. And he said it, I want to be free of this pain. I'm being torn apart. And he cried. And that struck, I feel like, a lot of, especially like the younger men who were expecting something completely different from him when he paralyzes that blaster shot. And then sometime later in the story, and he's crying on the bridge, people really had a hard time. They found that very jarring. And I think it's an interesting commentary of what you expect to see in your male heroes on screen, right? Or villains. So actually, we've been getting a lot of great comments on our YouTube page from some of our viewers, and the people who say, well, it's impossible for Rey and Kylo Ren to ever have a relationship. One of the things that they say is because Kylo has to hate her, he's going to try to kill her because she called him weak and she defeated him, So that's another piece of it, I think. The fact that a girl who was untrained was able to beat him. They felt like Kylo was undermined by the story and that he doesn't have the fortitude maybe to be the strong villain. So I think that's where it comes from.
But that's the thing, is he going to be the strong villain? That's the thing. But now you're talking about how he was defeated. It's interesting how the movie sets up this no fight. You have the bowcaster, Chewie's bowcaster, and you have like a couple scenes of him shooting it and blowing stormtroopers away, and then Han takes it. It's like, oh, this is great. They make a huge thing of that bowcaster. Why? Because then Kylo gets shot with it. So I think it's that, whoa, he is really, really hurt. I think that was the idea about it.
Right.
And also his emotional state for this no fight. And plus he wasn't really, I don't think he was trying to hurt Rey in any way. So, it's not that he got defeated, it's that he let himself be defeated, which is different and might be just as infuriating for some people,
Right.
might not help anything.
I think it's really important too that Rey had her moment where she tapped into the Force and kind of got supercharged, like for Dragon Ball fans, she went Super Saiyan on him, and she had this burst of power. Whereas if you think about it, it's almost like the Force kind of turned on Kylo in a way because he couldn't reach for that lightsaber no matter what. He wasn't well mentally, emotionally, physically. And then Rey taps into this force with his help, certainly, I think, because I think he pushed her to that point. But he was not able to hold his own against her. But I don't think that's a reflection on his force ability or his skill as a fighter. The fact is, he wasn't trying to hurt her or kill her. She was going at him with everything she had. So it was just, they were at a different spot. So I don't think it was an even fight by any means. Yeah, at the end of the day, he lost. He got his butt kicked by this untrained girl. And I think that's the bottom line for a lot of people. So it really sets up an interesting starting point for the next movie, because here is Kylo. He was defeated. He got cut in the face, and, you know, everybody saw it. Huck saw it. Snoke saw it. Millions of people in the world saw it. So now he has to prove himself to them. And that actually aligns with what Pablo was saying at the Comic-Con Chile. He made a comment about Kylo Ren has to prove himself. He's going to go see his boss because The Last Jedi will follow right where The Force Awakens left off. So we all know how that's going to end up for him, right? So assuming that Snoke is going to be very displeased, is probably going to give Kylo an ultimatum, and Kylo's going to go and find Rey so he can get even or destroy her. Supposedly, right? I mean, but he's in a mental state where he's going to be angry. He's going to be looking for just to show that he is a capable Force user. So very interesting setup. The question is he going to stay that way throughout the movie? I don't think so.
But the thing is, I agree to a certain extent, and that's what I was expecting. On the other hand, at the end of The Force Awakens, as he's lying there on the ground and he looks up, there's not a single trace of anger in his face. He's not angry.
Yeah. He doesn't look angry. He looks surprised and he looks like defeated, but he does not look furious. And this is a guy who can portray fury very well, and he does not look angry, you're right.
Yeah, so that's, in a way, he actually shows the opposite, that we're saying, oh, his masculinity, that he's very secure in his masculinity, because he's not angry that she took the lightsaber. He's okay with letting her defeat him. He doesn't need to prove that he's stronger, and somehow he wasn't angry. So yeah. I'm curious to see how it's going to be on the next movie. He could be angry because of what maybe Snoke would tell him, right? And maybe not angry, but having something to prove to his boss, like Pablo said.
There could be a little bit of reaction formation there. Like it's a defense mechanism where you basically do exactly the opposite of what you feel or what you'd like to do. Like classic example, a little boy likes little girl, so he pulls her hair. Very common. For side geeks, you probably picked up on the fact that there's a lot of really cool use of defense mechanisms throughout The Force Awakens, like when Kylo Ren yells traitor at Finn, classic example of projection. But anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of reaction formation with Kylo Ren using his anger as a shield to protect himself from the feelings that he's developing towards Rey. But anyway, you made a great point, Denise, about him being secure in his masculinity. I think that's something that is often overlooked in the discussion about Kylo Ren and his portrayal. The way that he looked at Rey, we've talked about it, and it's something Tina calls the marry me face. Not only is he okay with her being strong, he admires her for it. The way that he looks at her and the way that he wants to teach her, he wants to help her become even greater than she is. He's not intimidated by this girl in the least. On the contrary, he's drawn to it. So he is secure in his masculinity. I think that will allow him to be able to kind of move past this the girl defeated me thing and just do what he has to do. Definitely what he starts out with in The Last Jedi, I don't think is necessarily where he's going to end up. Obviously, he's going to have to go through some character development. So I don't see that as an obstacle for any sort of development between them. But anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah, no, but I don't see it. I just find that what I find fascinating about Kylo Ren is that I think his portrayal and the depiction of masculinity in him, it hit a nerve with a lot of people for good and for bad. And usually when you have something that really hits a nerve, it's gonna have extreme reactions. So that's how you said, but he should be only aggressive, not conflicted. He should not cry. And even though, again, Anakin cried, and I love Revenge of the Sith, and that scene and he's like with the yellow eyes and crying, I think it's the best shot in the prequels. I like the prequels. So I think there is some room for that, for this conflict, and that I said, do I follow my father or do I follow this other model? And then you're like, okay, why would he choose that model out of so many great things that he has? So that's super interesting.
Yeah. One thing that I've always liked about how they portray male relationships in Star Wars is that they're all so dysfunctional for the most part. When you think about the master and Padawan role, like Obi-Wan and Anakin, everything seemed to be great, but then Anakin Anakin's hiding from him his whole marriage. And then they end up fighting to the death. Like, they love each other, but they're forced to, like, hack each other to pieces, basically, in that duel. And then he ends up killing his master. But then when he goes on to train under Palpatine becomes his master. You get the sense that really the Emperor is trying to keep him from developing. He's trying to keep him contained and controlled. He never goes on to become greater than his master, which was what was supposed to happen. There's a scene that I really liked in Revenge of the Sith when the Emperor and Yoda are fighting, and the Emperor says to Yoda, Darth Vader is going to become greater than either of us. And that never comes to happen. And I think it's because Palpatine made sure that Anakin never reached his full potential. And I see some parallels in that with Snoke and Kylo as well. And we've talked a little bit about that in the Snoke podcast, but the idea is that why is Kylo choosing to submit himself to this thing that's basically just controlling him? Who knows if he's drawing like force power from him? Who knows what his agenda for Kylo Ren is? But he's obviously manipulative, and you gotta wonder, what does Kylo get out of this situation? Why does he need this kind of harsh father figure versus what he had from Han Solo? We don't know exactly what Han provided for him. We don't know how present Han was in his life. Lots of good questions. I'm hoping we'll get more information as the story goes on.
Absolutely. And there's also Luke as well. That was an uncle figure. What I found interesting is that in medieval literature, the uncle with the nephew, the sister's son, is the most important male-to-male relationship, because that's the closest relative that you're sure is your relative by blood. Because that's how it is. So, and you have like in Arthurian romance, you have the Arthur and Gawain, Arthur and Mordred, that's, a villain. And you had this Luke and Kylo relationship, that's this uncle, nephew. And Kylo is for Star Wars, is the first character that has his looks are inspired by medieval looks, and before it was not. So I think there is something of that in this uncle figure, that it's not like a father, but also like a very important figure in something really wrong, really bad happened there. And I think that's what we're going to learn about.
I actually think that it's easy to forget almost how important Luke was to Kylo, because we haven't seen them share any screen time. But everything hints in that direction. The fact that if you read Bloodline, they were off together on some quest, and they would disappear for long periods of time, maybe years. And so Luke was very important to Kylo, and for some reason, like you said, something bad must have happened that Kylo just rejected Luke and everything Luke stands for so completely. I mean, Han says that Luke felt responsible. He's not talking specifically about Kylo, but we can kind of imagine, right, that that's where it's coming from, and maybe Luke's exile. So clearly there was something that went wrong in that dynamic. It's really exciting to think about the fact that we might even get to see it, because if you remember in the teaser, there's a shot there of Luke and R2-D2, and there's like a temple in flames. So I think that's maybe a flashback. We don't know if it's going to be in the future, but it's a possibility that we'll get to see what actually happened there.
I think we will. I think we've had some comments that we're going to have like explanations. I haven't been up with spoilers. I don't want to go spoiled for this movie. But I think, that's something that we're gonna see. Something else, a little unrelated, I find interesting about Anakin again, because we're aspiring to be like Vader, how he doesn't really have a father. And something that I just noticed recently is that it's never really a problem. It's funny because sometimes you have in fiction children of single parents, usually single mothers, but it's a problem. It's something that's going to be problematic in the future, and I don't think it is. On the other hand, he falls for love for three women, right? His mother, his wife, and his apprentice, like a sister or daughter. So I don't know. And I don't really know what it means, but it's interesting how these relationships are there, but how I find he's not really in conflict with a father figure, but more like with an institution, unless later he gets Palpatine as this father figure.
Right. And I mean, you gotta wonder how that played into it too, because that's a very good observation about him having the institution of the Jedi Order itself kind of as what he was looking for, their approval, their acceptance. And when they rejected him by saying, you're not going to be a master, he gets furious, and that also helps him to fall to the dark side. And then he runs to Palpatine, basically like this father figure, controlling, and kind of like the standard thing that you think about, like a rigid dad, right? I think with Anakin, the interesting thing is that there's a big transference of like the mother stuff towards Padme that I don't think is talked about a lot, but it's there if you think about it.
Yeah.
He lost his mom in a terrible way. He was basically orphaned, and then he finds this kind of older woman, and he loves her so fiercely and so possessively. He's afraid of losing her, and that's what pushes him to the end. It's very kind of twisted and dysfunctional if you think about it. Very fitting with Star Wars.
It is.
With Anakin, I'm hopeful that we'll see more of him in the sequel trilogy. I don't know if those rumors about Hayden Christensen having some kind of part, that would be amazing if there's like a Force Ghost situation, because you really have a feeling that Kylo Ren is an idealized version of Darth Vader that he's hanging on to, but I don't think that came out of nowhere. I think that Snoke probably made up that, mystical figure for him, and maybe even showed him or had him like see like some kind of a Force vision or something fake that he thought Darth Vader was talking to him, and it wasn't really Darth Vader. Because why does he say, "Show me again the power of the dark side"? It sounds like they've had some kind of contact before, or at least Kylo thinks that they have.
I'm not sure it was really Snoke. On one hand, it seems that yes. On the other hand, it seems that he has a mission that's unrelated to what Snoke wants him to do. That's related to whatever it is that Darth Vader started. So it seems that he's doing his own thing, but with that mask, which I hope we get some answers about. And what do you think of Kylo killing Han?
Well, I think it's like the ultimate failed resolution of the castration fear of boys. Like you don't kill your dad. You fear that your dad will kill you subconsciously, and so you imitate him so that you don't end up killing him. So it's like total fail, Kylo. No, I think that Kylo was trying to kill a part of himself by killing Han. The part of him that is really like his dad, the weak and foolish part, in quotations, and that he was trying to exterminate that little bit of light that he had left in him. And he thought that by doing that, he would become more powerful because there would be no obstacle between him and the dark side. So I think that's why he did it. And he made a huge mistake. And I feel like he realized it immediately, because if you see that shot of him after Han falls over the precipice, Kylo's face, you can see that kind of widening of the eyes and mouth, and he looks in pain. And then that shot is mirrored by Leia as she kind of sinks down to the sea. So definitely he regretted it right away. And even like the actors talked about it. Adam Driver has said patricide's not all it's cracked up to be. So I think Kylo had a strong expectation that it would feel one way and it would accomplish one thing for him to kill his dad, which would be that he would be better for it. And it turned out to be just the opposite.
Yeah, I think so too. And how it's interesting what kind of idea he had about Han Solo that we don't really know, right? And it's in a way like made to be like a little horrific, and people are disturbed by it, which makes sense. But on the other hand, he really does look like a child, like his name is Ben, like Harrison Ford's son. For the script, you had a father and a son writing. So I think it is, like you said, this thing of fear of castration and psychological. It is in a way inspired by real father and son relationships, but of course taken to a very disturbing extreme, like for fiction.
Yeah, the relationships with the parents are always so complex, even if there's a lot of love, and sometimes there isn't. But in this case, I think we can say that there was. I mean, it's Han's son, right, and Leia's son. Obviously, that at some point there was a happy family there, even if probably dysfunctional. But even when there's a lot of love, and especially when there's a lot of love, it can be so painful to relate to your parental figure, because you're looking for that kind of approval from them, right, in a way. And it's hard to get it sometimes and get it in the right way. So you really got to wonder what happened between Han and his son. And when I read Bloodline, I wondered about it too, because it didn't sound like when Leia was thinking about him or talking about him, it didn't sound like Ben was especially wanting to be a pilot like his dad. And she mentions that Han kind of threw himself into training these younger talented pilots and founded like this pilot academy because he wanted to teach and couldn't get to teach Ben. So I think that there was a conflict there already from the beginning. Like maybe Han wanted to have like a Han Jr. kind of version of himself to bring up, and maybe Ben wasn't willing to conform to that and wanted to do his own thing. But it's interesting to think about what went wrong there.
Yeah. But you know what? In The Force Awakens, Han Solo finds Han Jr., you know, in Rey. Rey's like the son he wish he had.
It's really funny because there's an interesting subversion of the roles, right? With Rey, in a way, it's like she's taking the place of Ben Solo in the Ben Solo empty space, right? That he's supposed to occupy. She's sitting next to Chewie in the Millennium Falcon, where you assume Ben would have inherited that and piloted it after Han's passing, right? She's the one that's with Leia and hugging Leia goodbye. She's the one that goes to train with Luke, like Ben Solo did at one point. So in a way, she is the new Ben Solo.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There is this interesting dynamics. I'm just wondering if she's gonna go train with Snoke now. I don't know.
Well, you know, she's gonna flirt with the dark side, probably. So it's interesting because when she starts, like every hero has to face, you know, this darkness that's internal and external. It's part of the hero's journey, and how you make it through that test is really what determines whether you're going to be a hero or not. So when Rey is faced with darkness and is tempted by it, I think that Kylo Ren is going to be in a unique position to understand that because he went through it himself and he failed. So it's just, I'm really looking forward to that exploration of that. But one other thing that we've talked about is the fact that there's a very interesting kind of like bend to the gender expectations that you have, like going in with Rey and Kylo.
Well, yeah, I think she ends up having this masculine energy. She's the one that attacks. He's the one that, like I said, she takes his place. So that means she's like little Ben Solo, you know, like the way Han invites her to be part of a Falcon. It's like, you know, this dude, co-pilot. And if you see her in the trailer, you have her in action, moving, training, where he's not like moving so much. What do you think about it?
Yeah, exactly. And then when you think about Kylo, you've talked about how he's not like feminine cues, but there are aspects of him that are surprisingly soft compared to what you would expect. When you see him just trashing that console, screaming and wrecking the chair and all that, but then think about him with this vulnerability that he exhibits, and even the role of Kylo himself. He's the son of a princess who's been trapped by this sorcerer-like figure. So he's like the Disney prince in distress who needs to be rescued in a way. And then Rey's the hero who's coming in. So there's like a very interesting shift in that you would expect the girl to be the one to need to be rescued. No, she self-rescues. So it's very cool. I'm hoping that he will self-rescue too. I don't want to see him just like somebody grabbing him by the hand and saying, let's go to the light side. I want him to make that conscious decision.
Yeah, I think he's getting ready for this decision, right? He's been contemplating it. I think one reason people get angry at him is that from the cues in The Force Awakens, at some point before, when he meets Han, they would expect him to change his mind, because that's the idea that you have, that he's gonna, you know, become good, and he doesn't, and then you feel disappointed. So I think you have he's laying down the groundwork for him to make this decision, but of course he needs some help and some guidance, which seems, I think that's gonna be from Rey, not that, again, that's just going to turn him. And yeah, it's true, like his face, you know, with makeup and on the Battlefront promo, you know, the way he's portrayed, because
to the side.
Yeah. Even in most, like, you know, posters for movies, for some very stupid reason, I'm sorry, men, you know, they're facing the camera, they're straight and they have their legs apart, and women are kind of tilted, you know, sideways. Even like, I think Padme's, you know, like they show a little bit of their butts and everything. Anyways, but you know, you have that, and then you have him like sideways, which is very interesting again. So how these dynamics are going to play.
But by the same token, if you think about the Vanity Fair photo shoot, you can see that Kylo has done a lot of growing up between that photo shoot and the original one for the Force Awakens. You remember?
Yes,
he
I
looked
remember.
like emo Kylo Ren in that photo shoot. Whereas in the new one, the one for The Last Jedi, he doesn't look like he's wearing any makeup. He probably has a little bit of like guy liner, but he doesn't look made up, and he's got that like typically masculine stance, you know, with the legs apart. People made a lot about, oh, there's an outline in the pant area.
No.
Like, oh, yeah, they're trying to tell you he's a guy, okay? And he's got his sword, his lightsaber. So I think they made an effort to make him look like more grown up, more masculine in that photo shoot at least. Does that translate into what we'll see in the movie itself?
I think it is a little because, you know, now that we see his pants, actually, you know, like you said, people are making, not because of that, I'm sorry, I think people are imagining things, you know, this time I actually think people are imagining things, but, you know, like, he's no longer wearing his man dress, right?
Yeah.
So you actually see his, it's interesting, there's that Mael art of the abduction, which they really pump up the masculinity with raised bag there, you know? Yeah. that was not imagined, that's true. And there you can see his legs spread apart, and, you know, and the bag, you know, between his legs. So that's like more masculine, and that's why it's good. You're gonna think about. There's a podcast about it. That's why.
Yeah, I love how I don't remember who it was that commented on the Bon Jovi stance.
Which
like
is
Bon Jovi on stage, you know, rocking out. Kylo's got the total rock star look on that artwork, and that was approved by Lucasfilm. It wasn't a Lucasfilm artist, but it was certainly selected among like hundreds of other artworks to be featured because it represented what they were trying to convey. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, so he has a similar stance without the bag. Come on, guys, in the Vanity Fair photo shoot. So something else I wanted to comment on was Kylo's lightsaber in The Force Awakens. And, you know, we know what lightsabers are a symbol of masculinity. I don't need to explain why, right? But, I mean, swords usually. And his lightsaber is cracked and about to go, you know, like about to fail at any time. What do you think that means in this sense?
Well, I think it's just beautiful kind of visual storytelling, like we've said before in our podcast about that. It's basically just a really nice symbol of what's going on internally, and the fact that Kylo made that, it's like a representation of himself. It's crackling with tremendous power, but it is unfocused. It's not disciplined. You know, it's you're not sure if it's going to blow up or if it's going to actually work out. So I think it's really neat. And the fact that it needs the lateral vents, because the power can't be contained in a straight line. So without those little exhaust vents, it would kind of blow up. I think that's really neat symbolism for Kylo having his little tantrums, because he can't hold it in. He can't just contain all that turmoil that he's got inside. So he, you know, lashes out.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. But yeah, I also think that, you know, as for, like we were saying, masculinity, how it is unstable and not, almost like not focused and not, you know, something that's permanent. Like he's almost defining which model he's going to choose. But now, speaking of lightsaber, it's very interesting that Rey buries his lightsaber in the snow. And if you think about, you're talking about castration fear and how the lightsaber is. But again, that's not something that seems to bother him, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the way that he holds his lightsaber when he's interacting with her in certain scenes, it's very kind of clear language, I think, visual language.
Yeah.
When he approaches her in Takodana, and they even mention it in the novelization, right? That he holds up his like big red lightsaber, and when he points it in her face, right? And then in the fight, like you say, she like knocks it down and buries it in the snow and cuts his face up and leaves him kind of there for dead. Very kind of telling of her essentially, you know, overpowering him in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I also like that Adam Driver commented in an interview about the lightsaber, and he said that Kylo Ren's lightsaber is a good metaphor for his character. So it'd be interesting to see if that changes over time. I think they're going to do the same lightsaber in The Last Jedi. We see it in the trailer, but it'd be interesting to see what happens with Kylo Ren's lightsaber over the course of the sequel trilogy.
I'm interested in that as well, right? So,
One other thing that I wanted to talk about is that the fact that Kylo Ren's masculinity portrayal is very different from the Han Solo style of masculinity portrayal. That I think also gives us hints as to the possibility that the romance, that's a required element in the sequel trilogy. Come on, let's be real. If you think about it, Han Solo is like the standard masculine figure, and he's not toxic by any means. At least I don't think so, though. Recently, a podcast was shared online where somebody was arguing that Han is predatory, which I totally disagree with that. But I will agree with the fact that the romance between Han and Leia plays out in the more traditional way, where the man is kind of like the one who's initiating, pursuing, whereas the woman is more, receptive and kind of reacting to what the man is doing. I don't think that Leia was submissive to Han, which is what some argue, but certainly it is a more traditional wooing, of the woman. Whereas with Kylo Ren and Rey, given that Kylo Ren is not the standard masculine figure that you see in epic stories, it might be the case that the romance does not play out in the standard traditional way, but rather even Rey might be the one to initiate, even like to kiss him. Who knows? I don't know. But it's exciting to think about the possibility. I mean, already Kylo Ren grabbed her and carted her off into his spaceship. You can't get more traditional than that. That being said, that was subtext. That was not overt romance. That was all hinted at and subtext. If you see it, you realize what's being communicated, but by no means is it like the overt romancing it hasn't taken place yet. So I'd just be interested to see how the portrayal of masculinity here might also set a different standard for the romance as well. I think that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's about it for me. I find for me, the interesting thing is how it causes discussion for good and for bad, and how, we have this idea and how you can reflect on portrayals of masculinity. I'm super interested in it because I have a son, and, okay, so what's he's gonna aspire to? And I think these things are really interesting.
Yeah, I do too. And I really like that when you think about people saying, well, Kylo Ren can't have any good things in life because it's going to show kids that you can kill your dad and that, you can end up having a happy ending. I don't think that's how they're going to do it, first of all. And second of all, I do think it's important for kids to see this kind of thing play out, like where a character, has to suffer consequences for what they do, but also gets an opportunity for redemption and second chances. And also as a portrayal of masculinity, where you can be a man and cry and admit that you are in pain and that you're suffering. And that doesn't make you less of a man. So I think that's really important to have those messages out there as well.
Yeah, in a way, a message for boys would be that, aspiring for this ideal of pure masculinity that doesn't even exist, right? Real people, real men are not like Darth Vader. That can be very negative to the person and can be destructive, and it's not very good.
Exactly. Well, one more thing I wanted to add is that we are so grateful to our viewers and our listeners. You guys are awesome. You leave us amazing feedback. We love to hear your thoughts on what we're talking about. We love it when you leave really detailed comments that get us thinking too about, other possibilities or other aspects that we hadn't considered. We love it even when you disagree with what we say. We like to hear counterpoints too. So we also wanted to thank whoever nominated us, because we've been nominated for a Parsec Award, which is fantastic. That award gets, they have their ceremony at DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia, and we accepted the nomination. Fingers crossed, hopefully we'll win. So thanks so much for all of your support. It means the world to us.
Okay, everyone, so this was our discussion on the portrayal of masculinity in Star Wars and with Kylo Ren. If you have some time, leave a comment. We love them. Leave a like, and also check out our Twitter page, and we have a Tumblr page as well, and everything is on Mixcloud. Thank you very much for listening, and may the force be with you.